have just faced one of the greatest tests for humanity. As the pandemic spread across the globe, the world transformed, and so did we. We proved to be adaptable, resilient, and sustainable, with renewed confidence to tackle tomorrow's challenges.
Product shortages,
global warming, 感染再拡大で nuestros hijos y nietos a futuro.
and inflation. The COVID catastrophe is uniquely unequal.
Climate change, supply chain disruptions, and the resulting economic impact will significantly affect our lives, our communities, and the way we do business. To meet these challenges, we need to build new ecosystems and partnerships. We must invest in sustainable innovation. Today, the 2021 TCS Innovation Forum provides a unique platform to challenge ourselves, collaborate with ecosystem partners, and share collective knowledge. Sustainability, technology, and innovation are at the core of each discussion, as inspirational speakers share insights on how to redefine business and have a positive impact on the world around you. TCS is committed to improve environmental and socioeconomic impact. We are reducing 70% of our emissions by 2025 and aim to be net zero by 2030. We are building a hybrid workforce, integrating a global talent cloud to provide the best skills to customers and the best experiences to employees.
We have a unique opportunity today to combine a purpose-driven worldview with digital technologies and an ecosystem of TCS research and innovation, our business, our customers, and our partners to build a sustainable future for all of us.
The 2021 Innovation Forum brings us together to co-create a more sustainable, inclusive, and resilient future. Welcome to the TCS Innovation Forum 2021.
Hello. Very warm welcome to the 2021 TCS Innovation Forum for Asia Pacific. I'm Spencer Kelly. I'm your host today. So wherever you are right now, welcome. I hope you're all doing okay. We are still in strange times, aren't we? Different countries are at different stages in this pandemic, and there's still a lot of uncertainty around. I've worked with TCS for a few years now. I love them to bits. So I just want to say up front that they've all been in my mind over the past few months. India was absolutely ravaged by this thing in the last few months. I know that TCS and their families have all been affected by it. So to the TCS team, my heart goes out to you. I love you guys. And before we kick off proper, just a quick reminder that this session will be available to view online on demand shortly after we finish. Should you wish to watch something back, should your connection drop out, or should the doorbell go? I don't think I've got any deliveries booked for the next hour because it's 5 a.m. here, but you never know. The hazards of working from home, eh? Now, it will be worth watching again, though, because we've got loads of fascinating content across loads of topics and a whole spectrum of business sectors, too. We're going to gather together business, technology, and innovation leaders to share their perspectives and insights on how enterprises around the world are harnessing technology and the power of ecosystems to build a more sustainable future for all. The event's global theme is Building Sustainable Futures. This is about how organizations can leverage technology and innovation to help solve some of the greatest threats to our climate, communities, and commerce. And during this Asia Pacific session, we'll focus on how companies can accelerate innovation for a better tomorrow across industries. So let's take a look at the virtual event platform that we're all living in these days. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a row of widget icons, and these control the various windows, which are resizable and movable by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. So feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop. For a better experience during the panel discussion, for example, you might want to maximize the video window to full screen. We'll be answering some of your questions as part of the Q&A sessions as well. So please do use the Q&A box below to submit your questions. You don't need to wait until the end of each presentation to submit them. Fire them off as you think of them. There are also some assets related to the event which you can download from the Content Hub. We have a survey too. We'd love you to fill that in. You can do it anytime during the event. So maybe pick a moment when you think it's going really well. And on that topic, how can we forget that online conferences often have the occasional hitch these days? So if your screen freezes, you can usually fix things just by refreshing your browser page. If my screen freezes, we're all in trouble. No, we even have a backup plan for that, and she's called Michelle. So if you see Michelle, you'll know what's happened. And you can use the Q&A box to post any login or tech-related issues, and our support team will try their best to resolve them. So first off, it's time for our first poll question of the day. This is going to be shown in the slide area, so please make sure the slide area is open for you. We'd love you to make your choice and submit your response. So here's the question. As you focus more on your sustainability strategy, what do you perceive as the biggest challenge? Having a common understanding of what sustainability means for my organization, figuring out how sustainability affects my industry, developing a holistic sustainability strategy across business units and ecosystems, or securing funding for a transformative sustainability roadmap. Please do select the one that most closely represents your view, and we're going to bring you the results of our polls a little bit later. And if you have any questions or comments on what you hear today, like I say, please do type them into the Q&A box. We will get to them a little bit later. So our first speaker on the Innovation Forum is from Ananth Krishnan, Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer of TCS. Ananth directs research, innovation and co-innovation at TCS. Since 1999, under his leadership, TCS has created a huge range of new products and services with a wide IP portfolio. He's devised an agile model for innovation at scale across the entire organization. Ananth has served on several governing councils of academia, industry advisory boards, and government and alumni committees. In recognition of his contributions to engineering, he was made a Fellow of the Indian Academy of Engineering in 2013. He was named a Distinguished Alumnus of the Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi in 2009. He's been listed in Computer World's Premier 100 IT Leaders and in InfoWorld's Top 25 CTOs. He's a physicist, a computer scientist, and an all-round powerhouse. Basically, he's great. Over to you, Ananth.
Thank you, and it's a privilege to address the inaugural Asia-Pacific TCS Innovation Forum. If I look back at the history of the TCS Innovation Forum worldwide, over the last decade and a half, what started as an ecosystem connect event in 2006 in Silicon Valley and continued in that format for the first 4 or 5 years has morphed into a truly global event. Of course, in North America and Europe, where our first events were held for the first decade or so. But now it has avatars in not just here in Singapore, but in Tokyo, in the Middle East, in Latin America, India. And it's a privilege to bring together thought leaders, exciting startups, academic leaders, of course, TCS customers, and the best of TCS research and innovation and our larger business to this exciting format. We look forward to the journey because what started as very technology and innovation focused has now become, in this decade, very relevant to what TCS research and innovation stand for. These two brands are what we use to communicate our energy, our passion, indeed our direction to all our stakeholders. TCS Research is entering its 40th year in 2021. It's a promise that we have made to ourselves and to our stakeholders to say that we will invent for the future. We will look at every aspect of technology from the lens of how does it apply to our business, how does it apply to society at large, how does it excite and build talent, and indeed work closely with our ecosystem in academia and elsewhere to set the pace and set the direction. Innovation is exemplified by the PACE brand, and it comes to life in many different formats. It comes to life in our workshops. It comes to life in our exciting new products and services. It comes to life in the experience of our PACE sports globally. And indeed, I understand that there is one coming to your neighborhood shortly in 2022. And finally, PACE brings together not just the best of TCS, but the best of our entire partner ecosystem as well. What is it that the TCS CTO does? I put this chart together many years ago to explain to different people that in my responsibility, I look at it in three ways. One is, of course, that TCS research, all the exciting things that we do, not just in computing research, which is more than half of our nearly 800 or so scientists, but increasingly all the intersections of computer science with the other sciences, manufacturing sciences, mathematical sciences, biological and life sciences, material sciences, mathematical sciences, and so on. That is the stuff which our future is going to be made of, and that's what TCS Research works on across labs across the world, some embedded in academic institutions, some in TCS facilities, and indeed an exciting set of partnerships with universities. The Cyber Research Center in Australia is a great example where we work closely with the Australia university ecosystem for the last several years now. Cybersecurity is a global area of opportunity and concern. And TCS researchers and scientists from these universities, students, work together on solving these challenges in the context of different industries, not just from an Australia perspective, but increasingly from a global perspective. The Co-Innovation Network, which is my second responsibility, is about partnering with everybody who works in a startup, in a strategic alliance partnership, indeed sometimes works with customers. The startup ecosystem aspect of COIN, what we call the emerging technology COIN, has got a lot of legs in, of course, Silicon Valley, where it started a decade and a half ago, but today it is truly global. And I'm excited to see that Asia-Pacific startups from different countries, whether it's Australia, whether it's Singapore, whether it's Malaysia, and so many others, are now playing an active role, not just in the region, but also in a global footprint, because TCS brings these startups, accelerates their path to market, works with them collaboratively in engagements in different industries in different parts of the world. And lastly, innovation comes to life in not just the new products and new services that TCS launches, but also in societal impact that we create in different parts of the world. What is noteworthy here is, for example, the seed labs, which were inspired by TCS's Digital Impact Square in India, and have recreated this exciting new format where startups work with a large corporation and the social challenges of a particular region or a country or a city, and bring those to life in the sense that young people from these startups get incubated in a lab, working with TCS, working with ecosystem partners, and sometimes the local authorities to make these challenges get solved, but also inspire a whole generation of entrepreneurs. So that's what I do, research, partnerships, and innovation. And it has been quite a ride. Now, what exactly do we invent? What exactly do we look for from a portfolio perspective? As you can imagine, the world of TCS is very diverse. It's full of opportunities in different time horizons, in different aspects of our business, and different parts of the world, different industries as well. So how does one grapple with this complexity? I thought I'll share this framework that has been inspired by our long association in TCS Research and Innovation with Professor Clayton Christensen. The late professor has been a director in TCS's board of directors from 2006 to 2019. Unfortunately, he passed away in early 2020. But in his memory, we call this the clay map. it provides me a very simple framework where the multitude of ideas that you see on this chart can be classified into 4 different categories, 4 different quadrants. The bottom right quadrant is what we call the here and now challenge, the current business, the core business. And this is a set of things which need to be done to address the needs of an existing landscape over the next few years, perhaps. These are predictable because they're based on current competencies and they are typically based on current market needs or current customer needs. Broadly, let me call that the adaptive enterprise challenge. And in today's context, all the usual suspects are there. Cloud is there, cybersecurity is there, data is there, and so on. So that is what keeps a certain number of innovation projects very busy. We measure them on really here and now metrics in terms of ROI and so on. Moving to the other 3 quadrants, they have different risk profiles, different capabilities to impact the market, different timelines, indeed different competencies in which these teams have to work with, both within themselves, with the partner ecosystem and the customer ecosystem. The top right quadrant, which we call the AI-driven enterprise or the human plus machine story, this is where exciting things are happening, where AI meets challenges, not just in automation, which is where we started with products like Ignio, but also now getting much deeper into the science of every industry, whether it's digital twins for power plants, whether it is different capabilities that have been brought into place for regulatory compliance in a bank, creating a twin for a telecom company, and so on. So AI meeting the enterprise, AI meeting different domains is that kind of a story. And there are so many things going on there. Robotics is going on there. There is all kinds of different challenges being tackled. The left side of the quadrant, to conclude, is basically where the future has to now intersect with the innovation agenda. The future is uncertain. It's about future markets. It's about anticipating future customer needs. And again, we divide it up into 2 halves. The bottom half of the future is where existing capabilities can be brought together, typically in a new business model, a new engagement model, a new way of working. You don't have to invent the technology, but you have to invent the business model. This is what we call the ecosystem-driven quadrant. And here, exciting things will happen. 5G is going to be a big ecosystem enabler. Blockchain already is bringing together different capabilities and technologies. These technologies don't need to be invented. They're already here. But what has to be really thought through is the way they will come together in different industry contexts and solve completely new problems from a business perspective. So ecosystem is something that we are really working on. And lastly, on the top left is the blue sky quadrant, which is about the future, the science-led future. Sustainability as the theme of the innovation forums this year globally is looking at this quadrant for solving problems that we don't know how to solve yet. That's one extremely important aspect of the blue sky quadrant today. Can we look at different ways by which science can help the planet itself come through this global opportunity and global crisis? There are many more. Quantum computing is there. There is advanced robotics. There is behavioral science. There is general purpose AI. And that's the quadrant that TCS Research really plays a role with our academic partners and so on. So I hope I've been able to give you a feel for the way in which TCS looks at the future. We are excited about bringing the TCS Innovation Forum to Singapore and to Asia Pacific. And I hope you have a great, great experience at this inaugural forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ananth. Personally, I'm a top left quadrant boy, just so you all know. Okay, it's time for our second poll question now, and this is going to be shown in the slide area. Just check the slide area is open. If it's not by now, what have you been doing for the last 10 minutes? This is a multiple choice question, so go for your life. All right, so here's the question. With respect to your sustainability initiatives, where will you be focusing your energy? So we have loads of options for you to tick, as many as you like. Net zero ambitions, circularity, developing an ecosystem-led set of initiatives working with partners, customers and stakeholders to co-create sustainability initiatives, tightening procurement processes, sustainability reporting and disclosure, consulting and IT services to drive business transformation, seeking out new financing options to support transformation, developing a whole of company integrated business and sustainability strategy that breaks down silos across business functions. As I say, choose as many as you like. I guess the only non-answers would be if you tick none or if you tick them all, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, as I say, the poll results will come a little bit later, but please do tick the options that apply to you. And next is our Executive Insights session, which is going to be hosted by Girish Ramachandran. Now, Girish oversees TCS's growth strategy and business results for the Asia Pacific region based in Singapore. He said that he believes in harnessing the power of technology and innovation to drive change and sustainable business outcomes within and beyond the world of business. He's developed and led several programs adopted by TCS globally, including the TCS Sustainathon, Purpose for Life, Fit for Life, and he's also been an early catalyst of the TCS Running Sponsorship Program. Girish serves on the board of directors of the Global Reporting Initiative and is on the international board of Nyenrode University in the Netherlands. Over to you, Girish.
Thank you, Spencer. Good morning. Very good morning to you. So before I get into the panel, let me set the context. So as Spencer was talking about, COVID has now become a mainstay. And it is not just a health crisis. We all realize that it's also a political, economic, as well as humanitarian crisis. And what COVID has brought about is changes that might be permanent with traditional supply chains. And also we are seeing working patterns as well appended. So we are seeing economic inequality exacerbated, as well as access to healthcare and education varying across multiple countries. So we have had also some positive impacts on the awareness and actions related to sustainability. Let's take a moment to look at some of that. First of all, we are seeing that consumers are becoming more and more aware and conscious of the environmental and social consequences of the choices that they're making. In fact, studies suggest that 50% of the customers are influenced by key sustainability factors. Second, employees, and as we know, most of the employees today are the millennials. They are looking to work with companies that demonstrate sustainability in their business. And the third one, which is very important, which we will speak about, is about investors. Investors are really focusing on better performance and resilience of companies that are purpose-led in pursuit of balanced ESG strategies. So it's imperative that you need to align sustainability and business strategy together. And there is also growing evidence that boardrooms should prioritize sustainability. And it is no longer imperative, but it's also a question of existence as well, whether of your own organization. And in TCS, we've been doing some very interesting work in this particular area. So as Ananth was talking about, we've been collaborating with the academic to raise awareness as well as drive sustainability. We collaborating with the University of Auckland on a very interesting study called the Digital Sustainability Index to identify where does sustainability and innovation actually come together. We are also working with NTU on a sustainability-led thought leadership platform to address some important challenges. And then we have our own Desiree, whom we work with in Europe to build solutions for our customers in Europe. Similarly, we strongly believe in our responsibility to create jobs for the future. And we are encouraging, and we are one of the largest job creators globally. As was talked about, we created Sustainathon, a sustainability-focused ideathon, which was launched in Singapore, but further we have taken it all around the world. Today we have launched it in India, we have launched it across ASEAN, UK, which is on the sidelines of COP26, as well as in Europe. And finally, we are also empowering our own employees to lead the change. So very soon we are launching a mobile app which will track our own personal carbon footprint and which can actually measure our own consumption footprint and which help us adopt a beautiful, sustainable lifestyle. And to discuss all of this, I'm delighted to have two ladies, Mara and Professor Desiree. Mara is the chair of Asset Consultants Australian Impact Investments, and she's also the non-executive director of Funds Manager Australian Ethical Investments. And through an early career with Morgan Stanley's San Francisco Technology Investment Banking Group, and as a senior internet equities analyst at Macquarie, Mara understood the exponential power of capital and technology. She champions finance for good. And then Desiree is the professor of international business and chair of the International Advisory Board at Nairobi Business University. She is also a visiting professor at MIP Politecnica di Milano and also at Renmin University in China. And other positions include she's the board member of Atreides, as well as she's the advisory board member of World Trade Organization's chairs programs and International Institute for Social Studies and ECP Netherlands. So let me start off with you, Mara. Okay. Mara is from Australia, the sunny state of Queensland. Okay. Mara, you are an investor and advisor to companies. Do you see investors pushing businesses for better ESG norms? Okay. Are you seeing the push coming through? Okay. And can you give us some examples of where you are seeing this?
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I'm speaking to you from the hinterland of the Gold Coast. We have a tradition in Australia of welcoming people to the traditional lands. And here the custodians are the Yugambeh people. So I'm paying my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And it is an explosion in ESG investment. In fact, it's a bit of a greenwash explosion because many existing funds are simply relabeling, but there is a deep shift. There's no doubt about that. From the perspective of the models that are used, originally there were some light screens, for example, tobacco, in some cases nuclear. Then they became more intensive in the serious option of screening out emitters of fossil fuel, coal, oil, gas companies, others. That now is even shifting towards the deliberate cultivation of deep social impact. And we're seeing a new class of investment analysis that's able to deeply penetrate what that impact looks like, as well as understanding the financial model and the profitability and cash flow and so forth. Australian impact investments is an interesting example because we are only 4 years old, and already we are advising something like $30 billion worth of wealth managers here in Australia, are very large financial advisory firms. And also, like many countries, Australia is becoming concentrated in its wealth. And so very wealthy families that are making this shift, they invite us to assess their portfolios, kind of red, yellow, green, environment, social, as well as human rights, good governance. And then they are shifting, and they're shifting increasingly to listed portfolios in those sectors that offer health solutions, transport solutions, renewable energy, a lot of unlisted private equity, including the really wonderful example of investors beginning to even participate with entrepreneurs and asset managers in designing new investment asset classes and capabilities. So it really is a very, very interesting time. Also to remind people, we have mandatory investment for our retirement savings here in Australia. So we are the third largest pension market in the world. And these days, I kid you not, attending the AGM of a fossil fuel company is like a spectator sport. Investors are coming in with resolutions about pathways to shut down emissions, linking remuneration quite specifically to decarbonization, reduced fossil, greenhouse intensity of production. It's being coupled on board, kind of votes. And I guess there are some very, very exciting examples of investment cases that are coming up, but to demonstrate just how edgy it's becoming, you would have seen that in the Exxon AGM in New York, institutional investors for the first time voted on 3 climate activists to the board. And it was a small fund manager that has a discrete focus on transition. So the world is changing very, very quickly. And one thing I'm so excited about is how we can now support this vision, Australian ethical investments. To give you a sense of it, our share price has gone up 6,000% since I've been involved. It's insane. The funds under management are growing exponentially. And it's because the ordinary public, and you're quite right, they're becoming digital and informed and really connected to this narrative. They are just switching their investments. It's happening fast in real time. And, it's a very, very different world than even 3 years ago.
Very, very interesting, Mara. Do you see that significant push coming in Australia as well?
Look, in Australia, it's incredible. Our very large fossil fuel companies used to get votes of like 18% from these kind of marginal activist groups. They are now crossing the 50% threshold. 3 of our biggest listed oil and gas companies have been forced to disclose transition plans, including Scope 3 emissions. And for those that are really deepening their understanding of net zero, typically that is 80 to 90%. It's how your product is used, which in the case of coal, oil, and gas means when it's burned, very, very intensive. So as a consequence of that and foresight, what we're also seeing in Australia is this formidable transition from some of our leading resource companies like BHP and Fortescue Metals, where they are taking aggressive early positions on things like hydrogen, green steel. And we hope to move fast and move quick. We also see some companies, not so fast. And the funny thing is, watching the share prices for the ones that are moving and the ones that are not, you can really begin to see a narrative about creating a positive future through a change in investment. And it starts with working capital. It starts with upstream and where your R&D is going.
Thank you. Mara, you talked about, we spoke a little bit about Australia, but I want to see whether I can pick your brains a little bit from outside of Australia. Do you see significant new models coming in out for business success? Where do you see some examples of new models, new ecosystem leverage, and new partnerships creating value, significant value to consumers?
It will be 5 years ago now, I found myself in Copenhagen with the Danish government at their wonderful Green Global Growth Forum. And I was moderating a conversation which completely blew me away between the CEO of the Danish pension fund, Pension Denmark, and the CEO of the African Development Bank. And they were discussing how at that stage a project was beginning to get capitalized and it would come out of the ground. It now has been built and is delivering. Imagine Danish pension capital combined with other impact investors, with export finance by the Danish Credit Facilitation Program, supporting Vestas to put 365 very large-scale wind turbines in Lake Turkana, which is now going to power 15% of Kenya. And when you think about that capital trade and technology model, the returns go back to pensioners in Denmark, the Kenyan government, the investors themselves. The cost of generation has gone down considerably, and the climate responses are quite outstanding. Since it went into full production, if you compare 1 month in January 18 versus 19, the statistic is fossil fuel-based energy production in Kenya is more than halved, from 230 megawatt hours in January 18 to 100,000 megawatt hours in January 19. Blended returns, benefits, industry development, jobs, local innovation. I think this idea of countries and communities working together with large companies, small innovators, facilitated with global capital. TCS is in a sweet spot to support this kind of collaboration, but it's coming so fast.
Yeah. Thank you, Mara. That's wonderful to hear. Let me now go to Desiree. Desiree, welcome. It's early morning for you. So, as we all know, you are from the education sector, and education and knowledge is very critical for closing the inequality gaps. Okay? And we all know that the pandemic has affected the research and education sector. And what do you think is needed to ensure personalized, self-paced learning opportunities for improved outcomes among students?
Yes, good morning, Girish, and all of you online. Happy to be here. Yeah, interestingly, I think what COVID has brought us is really enhancing the digital capabilities of the educational sector, but at the same time, I think it has been too much of damage control, and I think more should be done to really transform the educational sector. And I think that's a whole different ball game, and I think we are a little behind there. So what I think we need is new social contracts with students, participants in programs, and it actually entails also education of both students and teachers. So I think there's both an opportunity. If you look at, for example, bringing lessons to rural areas that are recorded, I think it's great opportunities. But at the same time, I think there's room for improvement in terms of communications. So I think we needed to learn to better communicate, whereas we are in a let's say the profession is communication, but it meant we had to find new ways to communicate. And I think there's room for improvement. The social contract, the way we communicate, I think there is much room for improvement. And where I see really, let's say, more opportunity is in partnerships. So in working together with government, with business, to really scale up our efforts. So I see a lot of initiatives that we have, but it's not easy to scale them up. And I think for that you need different partnerships, and we are still stuck into old ecosystems at the moment. So we would need new partners, new ecosystems to really bring that forward and to go to the next level. If I look at our collaboration with TCS and PACE here in Amsterdam, it makes a world of difference. My students, it provides opportunities, inspiration for them to walk new paths, as it does, by the way, for me. But I think more of those collaborations should take place in order to scale up and to really transform the industry, which is needed.
Thanks, Desiree. In fact, as we're speaking, we are running a sustainathon on reimagining education across three ASEAN countries, Singapore, Malaysia, and Philippines. So I'll hopefully be able to tell you a little bit more from what we hear from the students on what is needed to transform education. Okay. I want to come to something very specific, which is we all know that talent is a very important factor for determining the success of every company's strategy. Okay? And we have a whole lot of companies participating in this. What do you think are the biggest changes needed to reimagine research and education, especially using talent?
Well, Girish, I think, it's not technology. I think technology is there, but it's the culture and the mindset of people, and both, by the way, of students and of teachers. So if you look at it, I think hybrid is there to stay. Even though many of the students have lacked the human interaction, the face-to-face interaction, at the same time, I really see that they want that hybrid model. There's no doubt in my mind that that's going to stay, that they want to take more ownership of their learning journey. And we need to respond to that challenge because, if you want to educate students for the future jobs and to provide them with the skills and the knowledge that they need for these jobs that some of them even don't exist today, we need to shape up as an industry to provide them with that. And for that, the culture and the mindset is, I think, very important. And I elaborated already on the collaboration between government, business and educational institutes. I think that needs to be enhanced, and especially to scale up some of the technology, the opportunities that are there in the educational space. And so I think we are still too much in the space of damage control and doing our best and patting ourselves on the shoulders that we have, made that digital transformation. But I think there is so much room to really change the game, and we have to. So in order to make that learning and to have students take control over their learning journey, we as teachers need to have look at different roles that we have and become perhaps more coaches than really only transmitting knowledge to students. So I think that cultural and that mindset change is very important to start with, and the collaboration with other partners, because I think that's where we really can make a difference. So and if you look at that, it's not just the educational sector. A recent study showed that if you look countrywide, less than 1/3 of companies and organizations are actually using technology to build a sustainable future. Less than 1/3. If you look at today, if you look what happened during COVID to supply chains, and what we need in the future, it strikes me, and I must say I was a little disappointed, because this is recent research. If you then see that less than 1/3 of the companies actually use technologies to build that future, a more sustainable future, whereas there is so much potential there. So my hope is really on those ecosystems, that partners are going to really inspire each other to really take action and to make that next step.
Thank you. I know that we are probably running out of time, but I want to ask one last question to both of you. Okay. We all know that we are doing this session against the backdrop of COP26. Okay. I want to ask both of you, if you had a magic wand in your hands, okay, what outcome will you want to see coming out of COP26 that will actually alter the future? I'll go with you, Mara, first.
Oh, it's so hard to pick just one. I can tell you things are happening in the corridors of Glasgow that may be more interesting than the main room. So we have, these what we call climate billionaires, Mukesh Ambani, Andrew Forrest, Bill Gates, many others. Huge cross-border renewable energy opportunities are being signed right now. We're reading about them in the paper, and I just think that's absolutely marvelous. One I wanted to mention very briefly, which is just pure imagination. I'm in Australia, you guys are in Singapore. Mike Cannon-Brookes, the founder of Atlassian, is partnering with Andrew Forrester of Fortescue, big iron ore company, to create SunCable, a $20 billion solar system in the north of Australia with a pipe to Singapore. Like, how amazing is that? And I think to the extent that something important can happen structurally, of course, we all want deeper and faster cuts. India was amazing in its commitment to 2030. China actually also is impressive on 2030. Article 6.2 is being debated as we speak. That will frame the ability for nations to trade carbon. And the whole offset economy is very controversial. I've spent a lot of time in the NGO community. In fact, I'm the president of Australia's National Environment Group, the Australian Conservation Foundation. There's many different views about offsets. I do believe it is a critically vital thing to be able to buy offsets that restore nature in ways that are credible, additional, et cetera. But to me, the most imaginative solution, they say there will be $100 billion in net zero corporate commitments over the next 10 years. Why shouldn't we use that money to fund transition, shut down coal-fired power stations in the developing world, and use the capital to invest in renewables and batteries with concessionary finance? We need to be imaginative how to change quickly.
Thank you, Mara. Desiree, what would your magic wand look like?
Oh goodness, I know what I would want. I want that magical wand, Girish, now, because I think at the moment we live in a world with too many words and too little action. So I would, with my magic wand, I would translate the willingness that there is with many, and you can see that, but many that really want to make it work. With my magic wand, I would translate that willingness into immediate action and scale small initiatives that do good for a few to really worldwide movement that can't be stopped by anyone of those who are working against or simply not care. So just make it one big movement on many things. So I'm dreaming about that magic wand, whether it's me or anybody else, but let's make sure that it becomes a movement regardless of industry or country or whatever.
Thank you. That's a wonderful way to end this particular session.
Tell me where I can buy it.
Can I encourage you? If you go onto a website called Together We Can Movement, it is a movement coming out of Australia to pull everyone from coal miners and educators and young people, old people, all kinds of politics. You should sign up from there. That would be so great.
Great.
Thank
on
you,
that
Maya,
very
for
positive note,
giving me the magic wand.
on that very positive note, let us try and conclude this session. So as we all say, we need collectively to build a more inclusive and secure planet. And what it means is working together, collaborating together, and creating new ecosystems so that we are able to nurture future generations and create stronger communities and societies. With that note, that optimistic note, I'll hand it back to Spencer to go into the next session. Thank you, Mara. Thank you, Desiree, for your wonderful thoughts.
And thank you, Girish. Yeah, nice optimistic end there. And I'll have that magic wand whenever you finish with it. Thanks. I've got a few ideas. So we were hearing there about the discussions and agreements being made at COP26. I was there last week filming a program too, and we have another poll question for you now. The results are coming soon. This is our third poll question of the day on the subject of COP26. As we near its close in Glasgow, do you think we are doing enough to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees? Do you think we need to make small improvements to plans and initiatives to achieve the outcomes required? Or do you think we must be much more ambitious in our targets and initiatives building towards collective actions? I'm placing my bet on where that vote is going to go. Please give us your thoughts. The results, as I say, are coming soon. And now I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Harish Manwani. Harish serves on the board of directors of Gilead Sciences, Qualcomm Incorporated, Whirlpool Corporation, Tata Sons, and EDBI. He's also chairman of the executive board of the Indian School of Business. And in 2008, he received the CNBC Asian Business Leader of the Year Award. And just this year, he was conferred the Public Service Medal by the Singapore government. If we have time, we'll do a Q&A with Harish after he speaks. So don't forget, if you have any questions, then please do pop them into the Q&A box. Harish, it's over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Spencer?
We can hear you loud and clear. Fire away.
Perfect. And can you see me? Important.
I also see you, and I'm curious to where you are and what time it is with you.
Well, I'm delighted to be part of this this forum. I'm actually in London at the moment, and it's a little early, but like they say, nothing like a good early start. And I was listening with rapt attention to the previous session, which I thought was great, and I'm glad that we feel, all of us collectively feel more optimistic about what's to come. But having said that, let's move on. When Girish and I spoke, he was keen that I speak at this forum, and I thought that the subject of building sustainable futures was exactly something I've always felt passionate about. And of course, the company that I spent my entire career, which is Unilever, if I may say so, was pretty much at the forefront of championing the cause of sustainable futures. But I think the important thing for us is to take a somewhat broader view on what's happening around us in the world, and what does it mean for corporates as we look ahead. When I sort of woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, which I normally don't, but I woke up because I knew I had this session, I was wondering what would be the best openings piece of information or a factoid that could be relevant to this talk about reimagining the future of business, and importantly to this audience. And I was looking at the market cap of the global top 100 companies in March this year, and it hit a record $31.7 trillion. I mean, that's a lot of dollars, by the way, $31.7 trillion. But here's the more interesting bit, and that is a record 51% increase from the pre-COVID period, not from March 2020, but March 2019. And I was also reading a statement by several people who commented on this, and there was a quote from a PwC partner who said that, led by the US, this highlights the ability of the largest companies to leverage technology to break away from the growth trend over the past decade. Now, this certainly sounds hugely optimistic about the future of business. And I think the question it raises is, so are companies really built to last? The answer, paradoxically, is actually no. Because on the other hand, if you look at another set of facts, which is that the average lifespan of companies listed in the S&P 500 was 61 years in 1958 and is now less than 18 years. And here's the interesting one. Believe it or not, McKinsey certainly believes that it is possible that by the end of this decade, 75% of the companies currently quoted in the S&P 500 may well have disappeared. Now, it's an amazing thing. So here we are companies are creating enormous shareholder value, but are they really built to last? And I think that is the question. Only 12% of the companies or 52 companies out of the 500 companies actually have been around since 1955 on this list. Now, why did I pick 1955? Because that's about 60 plus years. That's the average retirement age of human beings, working human beings. And to think that only 10% of the companies will make it there is quite something. So having said that, I think the more important thing is not the facts, but what does it all mean for businesses? And I wanted to just quote Lenin, who during the time of the Russian Revolution in 1917 said there are decades when nothing happens, and then there are weeks when decades happen. And we do live in this volatile, uncertain, and complex world where there are 1,000 revolutions going on every week. And it is for people like you and I who work in businesses to be able to make at least some sense of it and to be able to create a point of view of what matters to the world that we live in and we operate in. And I thought that maybe we can just look at, under all this noise of, the terrible sort of pandemic that we've all been sort of put under, COVID, what was happening in this world before COVID hit us? Because I don't think fundamentally some of the mega trends have actually changed. All they've done during COVID is to make us more aware of it, and in many ways precipitated or accelerated some of those changes. So what is the context of the world that we live in? So on the one hand, I spoke about companies that are thriving. On the other hand, you have a situation where you have communities where we have rising inequality of the kind that we've never seen historically. The top 1% pretty much have access to more than 85% of the total world's wealth. It's just not normal. The second bit, and I heard glimpses of that being spoken about, is that we live in an enormously resource-stressed world. And you saw the outcome of the climate change conference that was held in Scotland recently. And you could see that there is a lot of pressure on the developing world to actually do something about carbon emissions. And the point of the matter is that you cannot prevent people from consuming and striving towards a standard of living which the developed part of the world has taken for granted. That is the reality of the world. In other words, we have to find ways of being more responsible in the way we consume. If the developing part of the world starts consuming like the developed part of the world, we would need 3 planets. And I think all of you are smart enough to know we don't really have 3 planets. So that, to my mind, is the second dilemma. The first is rising inequality, and the second is the resource-stressed world that we live in. And finally, closer to all of you, it is this whole double-edged sword of technology and what digitization is doing to the world. On the one hand, it's making our life so much better. It's giving us access to the kind of information that we have never had before. I mean, an interesting fact, we are probably now generating more information in 24 hours than we did since the beginning of civilization or recorded civilization. That's a lot of information coming, and it's made life easier. It's also increased productivity in corporates by 30 to 40%. But on the other hand, it's also creating issues and uncertainties around employability and employment. So those are some of the challenges that we are all battling: the rising inequality, resource-stressed world, and of course, the impact of digitization. A lot of good stuff, but along with it also some issues that we are seeing. And in this context, where is business? And if I may be very candid, I think there is probably more mistrust about business today, because a large number of people, large number of communities and people on the street actually believe that business has been part of the problem. And I think that is really what we have to change, both the reality and the perception, which is, how does business become part of the solution to some of these issues that I spoke about? And how do we really make sure that we can also address as a body, how do we collaborate, partner to build, to bring about social change, which is also good for the society and not just good for us. And that's really what I want to talk about in terms of what will businesses of the future look like. And the reason I feel confident about it and optimistic about it, cautiously optimistic, is because we are beginning to see glimpses of it. But I really want to go back to some traditional businesses that many, many years ago, when they were founding their businesses, embraced what I think fundamentally was the essence of business. I mean, Henry Ford talked about business is a service, not a bonanza. I mean, amazing. I mean, can you imagine the Ford of today in standing in front of investors and saying, business is not a service. Business is a service, not a bonanza. And that was the mindset of founders. How do we ensure that we create good businesses that cater to the needs of our communities, but also create value that goes across the board? And that brings me to, if you like, the subject of the day, which is how do I reimagine what the future of business and great businesses will look like? So let me talk about just 5 things. The first one I want to talk about is growth. Growth is still very much in fashion. If you don't grow, you don't have a future. But I'm going to talk about dimensions of growth. The model that we all followed for many, many years is a model of what I call a 3G growth. Growth that is consistent, growth that is competitive, growth that is profitable. And that is really what created this enormous value, sharp focus on shareholder value and value creation. Though that was the 3G model of growth. And I think we now need to add, and thankfully a lot of companies already are, the 4th G, which is growth that is responsible. And to my mind, while 3G is essential because we need to create jobs, income, and lift generally the standards of living of society, we also need to make sure that we are able to do this responsibly. And our responsibility is to cater not only to the needs of the shareholders, which is important, but also to the need of the larger society in which we serve. I still remember when I joined Unilever, the then chairman of Unilever, we were talking about, we were the first to start the maritime fishing forum for sustainable fishing in Europe. And we used to have a brand at that time called Bird's Eye Fish Fingers. And he says, no fish, no fish fingers. It was enlightened self-interest that helped us, that drove us and motivated us to create this forum, because as the then chairman said, that you cannot have a thriving business unless you have thriving communities. Absolutely simple, but fundamental to what we are talking about here. So that is my first the point, which is move to a model of growth that creates economic value, but also creates social value in a sustainable way. And that's the 4G model of growth. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The second bit is we live in this world where we said the only constant is change, and that's a cliche now, but it's exponential change, black swan events, things happening by the day, the kind that we have never been able to either predict or forecast. And in a context like that, organizations that are going to thrive are going to be organizations that believe in continuous transformation. And I'm a great proponent of this. It's not about continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is incremental. We are talking about continuous transformation. How do we remain relevant in today's fast-changing world? And for that, you need to continuously innovate. But my definition of innovation is a somewhat broader definition. It's not just about product innovation or service innovation. In fact, the modern guru of innovation, Clayton Christensen, said, innovation is doing things differently that create value. Innovation, therefore, is not just about products. It's about new processes, new ways to operate. And this is where the role of technology comes in. But it's important to remember continuous transformation. You have to constantly ask yourself, what is it that I have to do to remain relevant in today's context? And that, to my mind, is becoming increasingly important for companies that are built to last. The third important aspect of businesses of the future is that every company is a technology company, not just TCS. Every company is a technology company. You are either a creator of technology or an enabler of technology or a user of technology. And it's very important to embrace what we are seeing around us. And the reason for that is very simple. When you live in a fast changing world, you have to manage your business dynamically and with agility. If I may be a little controversial, the long term in many ways is dead. Actually, it's the medium term that's dead. The long term is still alive, and I'll come back to that. It's all about the short term and the long term. And in order for us to dynamically manage the business, you have to use technology to be able to innovate better, to be able to really move in the marketplace better, and to, in many ways, help with the quality of decision making that is fast and yet fact-based. And to my mind, agility and dynamic management of the business is where technology is helping. So, like I said, a lot of value is being created down across the value chain, from people who are creating technology to those who are enabling, and of course, to those who are using. And I know several examples are given of Tesla not being a car, but being software on wheels. I would say, name any company, and I can tell you, they would not be where they are, successful companies. They would not be where they are if they were not either doing either of these aspects, using either of the aspects of technology. And that brings me to my fourth point. And I think that the pandemic, in many ways, has taught us how important this is. Caring is a competitive advantage. I'm not talking about the words talent and so on. Of course, these are all important. But caring for your people is a competitive advantage. And what I really like here is, again, going back to some of the early founders. If I go back to the quote from the company whose board I am on, and the company that's part of TCS is part of that group, which is Tata's, JRD said, to be a leader, you have to lead human beings with affection. I know it doesn't have the same ring of, the wordplay that you would hear, but to me, it's such a simple and powerful statement. The founder of Lever, Haskett Lever, said, I believe nothing can be greater than the business, however small, that is not governed by conscience. So it is about caring. But there are two aspects of caring. The one aspect of caring is to constantly ensure that all your employees have a license to operate in a world that is changing. You are ensuring that there are organizational capabilities and individuals are being built to be able to operate in this new world. I mean, you cannot tell a pilot of a 737, Boeing 737, to go and fly a Dreamliner. You have to, there is a famous book called Corporate Athletes, and I'm sure a lot of you have read it, Jim Loher and another writer. And they say that the difference between athletes and corporate executives is that athletes spend 85% of their time training and 15% of their time performing, and corporate executives do it the other way around. They spend 15% of their time training and 85% of their time performing. And if you now look at the larger population, you have to ensure that you are a learning organization, always learning, always upskilling. So that's one aspect, the license to operate. That's how you care for your employees. The second bit is caring in a crisis. And I think it's come to the fore during the pandemic. And for example, that many companies have risen to the occasion. And I'm really delighted how across the board, companies have kept employees first. Because quite frankly, you're not going to get a second chance to make that first impression. It's in moments of adversity and crisis that you actually walk this talk, that the most important asset that you own are your people. And finally, my last point, which is leadership. Leadership matters. But the kind of leadership that matters in today's context is a purpose-led and a values-driven leadership. Every corporate has to be driven by a larger purpose, more which represents more than their products and services that you make. I remember when I was joining Unilever and I was told that our mission in life is to make sustainable living commonplace and to change the lives of billions of people through simple products that we make. And I said, here is a company that sells soap and soup, and we want to make sustainable living commonplace. But then I understood that when 2.5 billion people use your products every day, small actions can make a big difference. In any organization, the role of a leader is to unleash energy. Energy gets unleashed by not just giving them your sales forecast or doing, a little bit better in terms of business performance. It comes out of that larger purpose that makes people wake up in the morning. And that really is all about unleashing energy in the organization. And the second bit, which is about values driven. There are, we are, as corporate executives, we're so used to telling people what to do. But sometimes we have to tell people what not to do. There have to be some non-negotiables in a business. Because at the end of the day, people are your most important assets. But more than people, the most important asset is managing the corporate reputation, the reputation of your organization. With a click of the mouse, the whole reputation can be destroyed if you do one thing wrong in one part of the world. And therefore, purpose-led and values-driven is key. So those were some of my kind of lessons that I have learned on how to sort of create future-ready organizations. But if I had to summarize it, I'd like to kind of paraphrase, with apologies to Jim Collins, who wrote this famous book, Good to Great. And I think the companies of the future will not be good to great. They will be companies that will move from great to good. Companies that produce a great performance, a great 3G performance, consistent, competitive, and profitable, but will also be good for society. These are companies that are good companies. And to my mind, moving from great to good is what the companies of the future will be. Thank you very much. And with that, I hand it over if there are any questions.
Harish, that was fascinating, very inspiring. Thank you very much. We won't have time for questions, I'm afraid. But once again, from all of us, thank you very much and best wishes.
Thank you.
So earlier, we asked you a few poll questions. Thank you very much if you took part. Time to look at the results very quickly now. So the first question was, as you focus more on your sustainability strategy, what do you perceive as the biggest challenge? Overwhelmingly, developing a holistic sustainability strategy across business units and ecosystems was the most popular answer. Yeah, there will be a theme here about holistic and getting all our ducks in a row, I think. The second question, let's look at that. With respect to your sustainability initiatives, where will you be focusing your energies? Two answers stood out here: developing an ecosystem-led set of initiatives, working with partners, customers, and stakeholders to co-create sustainability initiatives, and also developing a whole company integrated business and sustainability strategy that breaks down silos. Still working on those silos, aren't we, across business functions? Those are the two most popular answers there. And finally, this is very telling, isn't it? As we near the close of COP26 in Glasgow, how do you think we're doing? Absolutely no one thinks that we are on course for just 1.5 degrees. Overwhelmingly, people think that we must be much more ambitious in our targets and initiatives, building towards collective actions. Thank you very much for taking part in our live polls today. We hope you found the results informative. And once again, thanks to all of our speakers and panelists in this first part of the Innovation Forum. That wraps up the plenary section, though. We're going to move on to the breakout sessions now, and I'm going to hand over to Michelle Lemons, who's the Head of Business Sustainability and the CTO for Asia Pacific at TCS. Michelle's going to be hosting the breakout segment. The sessions look really interesting, so please do stick around and join one or both sessions for some great conversation and learnings. Michelle, it's over to you.
Thanks, Spencer, and fabulous insights from the sessions so far today. I'm very pleased to welcome you to join us on the two sessions we have planned next. Both are very important, and so I wanted to let you know that we'll make the recordings available after this event today for on-demand review. The first session is called the Great Work Reset, and it goes beyond the pandemic and working models to ask, how do our mindsets need to change around building cultures, sourcing the best workforces from anywhere, and how does skilling change for our youth and extended workforces, to name a few areas. The second's around greening our digital DNA and how the capabilities around green software, both development, implementation, operations need to change, along with infrastructure and e-waste and green actions, capturing the imperative around inclusiveness and accessibility. You'll see the links on your screen. Look forward to joining you there.